So when we started to understand the market, we started to repackage the products for the market. And that's one thing I would like to say about technology. Just learn to adapt it to the market. Now we're talking AI and this. What's important is how do you actually deliver that solution in this market? The way it worked in Europe or US doesn't mean it's the same way it's going to work in this market. So we have to adapt it.
A lot of people say Nigerians were one of the most resilient people in the world. I don't know if a lot of people agree with that, but we have brilliant minds here, I would say. So in what ways can Nigeria build stronger innovation pipelines that are not just local in context, but can compete globally?
I would like to re-echo your statement that yes, we are very resilient.
Exactly.
Because if you look at what we've gone through and the way we've leapfrogged, it takes a lot of resilience to see all the barriers or challenges and keep building. So I think that statement is quite valid. But I like also the question you asked us, how do we look beyond our local market? I know the local market is large, over 200 million people. How many countries in West? There's no other country in Africa that can give you, maybe the closest is Egypt, that can give you that kind of, it's not even that large. So we have the largest population. So like a large market, so you almost feel like any product you build will be consumed by the market. But it's a good time to start thinking about globalization. How do we export our innovation? We have done a lot of consuming and we've built for the local market. But I think the next step is to really build at scale that we export our innovation. But how do we do this? That we probably have to relook at the way we've done things. You don't have to change too much, to be frank. So you could start with the ecosystem. How do we ensure when we build with structure, process, design in mind? Because now the quality at which you build is different, isn't it? In the days of, what do we used to say it? When you buy shoes and clothes from Abba, there's a word, Abba, I don't know.
Is it Abba made?
Abba made, like just it's cheap and cheerful we are buying.
Okay.
But now we say no, Abba made should be done at a level where Abba would export it to India, to US, and people will buy it and be happy with that quality of work. So I think that's creating that ecosystem. And it could mean also supporting the ecosystem with regulation and policy. It could be IP, protection, because if you start operating at that level, it changes the way we do things. Someone made a comment which I want to refer to. He said in the good old days of Nollywood movie, they just take anybody's music and play. Nobody cares about IP content or licensing it. They didn't care. They just be playing people's music. But these days they know, because now they're exporting the content. You can't just play people's music without licensing the content. So that's a great example of saying we should start building at scale to export, because we do have innovation we can scale. Partnerships, and that's all also to do with ecosystem, where the ecosystem now partners with all the global bodies, because it creates an avenue to export. Think about if we did work. Think about Nollywood and Bollywood, or Nollywood and Hollywood doing a joint project. It just takes it to a different level. It means whatever production we have will be shown in both markets, isn't it? And will be consumed in both markets. And I think that's how we can build, even when we build our tech, fintechs, health techs, if we start creating those avenues for these local startups to also partner with global bodies or collaborate and build with that in mind, we would easily export. We could easily export our innovations. So just a few things we could do. We're almost there. I think the last part I would say, which is the soft sell part, is the proudly Nigerian part, which we've never really... We've done it when it comes to some parts like media, our music, Afrobeats and all that. But we could do it with our technology. We should be proud to represent our nation in those places. I'm proud to create visibility for it in spaces where we can. We should be proud, just like we proudly wear Nigerian, proudly use Nigerian tech if possible. And that's another way to create visibility. You know how you show up at an international event and people are admiring your hairstyle or your outfit, and you tell them, oh, it was a Nigerian designer, but I could hook you up. Think about it if it was tech. So those are some soft sells too we could do.
You've shaped innovation at a global scale, stage, and now you head a Nigerian enterprise. What do you think that we need to do to become the producers, of breakthrough technologies. So we're doing okay, in some areas.
So I'll tie to some of the things I said earlier, but I want to re-echo something I think Linda had mentioned, because for a long time we have been building, but maybe not with the structures or the system in place. And we've got some systems that work because we've built them for the local market. So it's back to some of the things I said earlier. But now we could build with the intentionality to also export, because we've already shown that we can solve problems. I will see and I will speak to things like mobile money. That's an African solution. And that came because we didn't have credit cards like they had. We didn't have high adoption for debit cards. But people just wanted to transact no matter how little. And we had the fastest in terms of distribution network to be mobile phones. So it was easy to now transact on the phones. So mobile money took off. And that's something you could take to other places like Asia, Latin America, where you have similar dynamics and they would need that. But what we have to hamper on is some of the things I said. Then the way you design, the structure, the process, talent. Because it's no longer your about only story, You're not thinking, how will I take that apprentice, polish him that when I'm done with the apprentice, I'm looking at the Igbo system of apprentice, that apprentice will create his own ecosystem that he can export. So that's what we are thinking about, the quality of the work we do. So just don't do it and say you're just cheap and cheerful. Do it that if I put this thing on the global stage, I will compete favorably. And that solution, because it's still humans, isn't it? So you find out that you always have someone somewhere that has a similar need or has a similar problem statement. And if you solved it for Nigerians, it's almost possible you could solve it there. But you can't just solve it because anything goes here, you think that anything will go. So back to some of the things I said, IP starts to become important, Here, throw anything, mix anything, you don't even have to license it, no IP, it works. There, you probably have to license some of these things. So helping startups and companies start to understand what it takes to build for a global market is important, because if we do that, then they can scale easily. They will not just do it for Nigeria, they will do it for Nigeria, the Western market, Asia, and they would export it from Nigeria. And that's what we want to see. I think that's the next level. And it would even go to, I would almost say that it would be proud to say, at the beginning, people won't believe you. So if people won't believe you, what happens? You have to show them. So maybe we should even invest in Nigerians, because now we're talking about building for global markets. So how do we get them to build for global markets? In the early days, just like your Nollywood early days, who were the investors? It was the Aba traders and the Onitsha traders that invested in this talent. So right at this stage, I think Nigeria should get used to investing in startups in Nigeria as well, or businesses in Nigeria, because that's a good way to enable those businesses. So these are some of the things we can do, creating a structure, that's the whole ecosystem, IP, to make sure that we build for quality, not just building alone for this market so it can be exported, but bearing in mind as we're building for all that, we should also learn to give them that break, because other markets might not understand what we are trying to do. So investing in those businesses is important. I said invest, I didn't say the government has to invest, because people always think the government has to solve all your problems. But government doesn't have to solve all your problems, because if you see some of the places we've made some very great headways, I don't even think the government did as much. Look at your music industry in Nigeria, or your media, or Nollywood industry. Some of these things just evolved of their own evolution, and maybe with time the government helped with regulation or putting structure. So even back to what I was saying in creating collaborations, it can be a bit of both. It can be private sector and the government creating ability for that local ecosystem to collaborate with other international partners as well, or partner with them.
Even when you mentioned mobile money, we're sitting with a group of people a while back, and we just really realized that in Nigeria we have like the most democratized systems of payment. You have 5-6 options of, making payments after a transaction.
Yes.
And you hardly find that, in other places. It's either you just put in your card details or you do a transfer. But here
most places is if you go to the West, everybody pays with a card, isn't it? But here, we give you options.
You have options, like my right of options to choose from. So definitely we do have something that we are doing well, and that with structure we could definitely export.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So I like the perspective you had around collaboration. Here people, when you say we have to do certain things, people think Nigerian government. And there's something that I often say, it might not be the popular or the most nice, perception to have, but I think people need to shift the mindset of what has Nigeria done for me, or what can Nigeria do for me, to what can I also do for Nigeria as a nation, and that's where impact comes into play. So how can you collaborate and partner with the government for growth? In fact, I feel like there's a certain level you get to in life, you become Nigeria. You become, do you understand? You used to start thinking that way, so you shouldn't just be what the country can do for you, but it's also what you can do for
That's
for the
a
nation.
shifted mindset.
Exactly.
Because, for a long time, all we said was the national cake. So everybody is expecting to get a piece of the cake that they will take away.
Yes.
And like you said, no one has ever really brought into consciousness. And maybe there's a rebranding required for Nigerians, because that's the whole shift in mindset, where people are not waiting to take something, but are thinking about what they can contribute. I don't think it's something we can solve in one day. It may take a whole generation or two, because it really has to start with transforming the way we see our nation. Because I go to some countries, that's how people think. People are so protective of their nation or their national brand. In our own case, we are more like, what can we take away and just move on. So that's something that is definitely, I know it would take more than probably a generation to fix. But if we can start changing that mindset, you will see people bring 120%. Because a lot of things have been done in silos from small, unique perspectives. So think about if we are now collaborating and doing that. And that's what happened a long time. A long time we would run businesses. Nigerians are very entrepreneurial, but lots of solo businesses. They're just like solo family businesses. Beyond a generation or two, it dies and people restart. Why you go to other places, they have generational wealth. They grow and scale and make it bigger and global. And it's just some of these things we are discussing. If we can start imbibing them, then that apprentice will not just build from his small shop. His small shop very soon will be in Senegal, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Zambia, Rwanda. Before you know it is in London, and that's what we want, where Nigerians now become global. But that mindset shift is required, because if you're all waiting for this national cake, we are going to take some. First of all, I don't know where this cake is, because I don't know if oil is giving that much money.
So he's laughing in there. She's in the audience laughing. Oh yeah. Okay, so when you were talking about, talent and, involvement, I know you, Jane. I'd say I want to get slightly personal, right? You're someone who understands the importance of inclusive innovation, and you support women a lot. And that's something that is very commendable, right? But from a leadership perspective, how do we design tech strategies that don't just include the marginalized, but can empower them to be co-creators?
It's a very, very deep question you just asked, and you can take a whole podcast session. But it's a good question, because some of the things we had re-echoed in all our discussion, actually this brings it into part. The fact that the Nigeria we see here today is more than those we see on TV, more than those we see in the cities. To truly have the Nigeria we want, the transformed Nigeria requires everyone. And that means it has to be inclusive, how we build, all these things we are talking about. It can't just be for only those of us that are educated or went to school or live in the cities, or only the men. It has to be inclusive from different angles. so that people that are not even living in the same with the same disposable income would have access. People that are not living in the same geographical area would have access. Would not exposed to the same level of privilege will still have access. And that requires us to be intentional in terms of how we design and plan whatever we do, because it's so easy to leave people. You can look at it from the gender perspective, which is really being talked about a lot. But there are other ways we are not including people. And a great way is digital inclusion. Because we feel, we got the internet in the right places, we got broadband in the right places. The other ones will figure it out. They're not figuring it out. We went to launch, the place we went 3 weeks ago is outside just Abuja. They don't have coverage. 12,000 people living at that border town. There is no coverage. But I'm sure if you ask anybody, they will tell you there's mobile coverage in Abuja. But you've forgotten that those are 12,000 people we just left behind. And they really want to trade. They want to use that access. But nobody has just thought that they deserved to be, given that, maybe because nobody knows the chief, or the chief is not politically aware to know who to talk to. What it shouldn't be. That's what we are saying. So we have to be more inclusive, and it's beyond gender, because if they are citizens, I think it has gotten to the point that access, broadband access, should be a right. Just like you say food and shelter should be a right of citizens. Broadband access, because in this day and age, digital inclusion is a thing. If you really want them to come mainstream, to add to the economy, that's one of the greatest ways you can let them do that. So being intentional in terms of how we build, how we design programs, how we decide to solve our national problems, knowing that the nation is more than a few, either the few that are visible, or the few that have strong voices, or the few that have access. So there are different ways to look at it, not necessarily even gender. So if we start to be more intentional in terms of but even in terms of how we write policy, we would reconsider. Because it's so easy to write policy, if I do tech, for example, and give access based on people that can afford it. Say I'm issuing a license to build a mobile operating network, and I do that based on who can afford the license, and they start to build. So just like the example I gave, they will only build where they have money. They won't go to places where they feel I said feel. It means that there might actually be money, but the data they're using to make that decision shows them that there is no money, so they won't go. A great example, when people build, they look at, it could be the distribution of power. So how a place looks at night. If there's dark spots there, and those places don't build there, people cannot afford NEPA, or they cannot afford a utility. These are not the places I want to go to. But maybe that's not true. Maybe they can afford it, but they decide to switch it off at night to reduce the cost. Maybe they can afford it, but they're using solar. So, there could be other reasons. That's what we are saying. So it takes intentionality that when we are driving using policy, we consider that no, we want this access, or we want this infrastructure everywhere. So even though I would license you for these areas, I would mandate you to even go to these areas that might not look attractive. That is what you give me in return. And it can be used for different ways and in different shapes of writing policy to incentivize private sector, even public sector, to go to areas that would actually need some of these solutions we are talking about, and not to restrict themselves to the places of comfort, which is the easy ones to do. So yes, I think it takes a lot of intentionality, and it's not something you could solve. Just really be intentional how we draft policy, how we build ecosystem. We ask who is in the room. We say that when it comes to gender, isn't it? We say don't have that presentation or that speaking engagement if everybody's a man on the panel. Same thing, when you're building solutions for a state, who is represented? Who are those in the room when you're writing the policy? Because you also determine the voices you will hear and what will shape that policy. It has to be more inclusive, which is why I must mention I'm proud of what my minister is doing. I'll just give an example. So I know when we're writing the AI strategy, it was so easy to get all these smart people in the room and tell them to write. But he did it differently. First of all, we looked for all the Nigerians in diaspora that are experts in AI field. Then we looked for students, civil societies, even to people in sectors like defense, because you wanted a strategy that was a bit more holistic and everybody's voice was heard, because everybody will voice their own opinion. I think that's the intentionality required in building, so that when we build, we don't build for a few. We build for a nation, and everybody is represented.
Okay, so that's really a powerful sentence you just made, building for the nation. I think it still ties back to what we said earlier about thinking, having a mind shift from what can Nigeria give me to what can I also give Nigeria. So it's been a very interesting. I wish we had more time, honestly, Jane.
It's like it just went, time went so quickly. Yeah, went by so quickly.
I wish we could just keep talking, because this has been a very interesting conversation with you, and I'm sure that Chioma agrees with me and our audience as well listening in. So thank you for joining us. But before you go, we want to ask you this question. If you have 120 seconds in a room filled with overwhelmed entrepreneurs, what would you say to them?
That's a good one. 120 seconds. So technically I have 2 minutes in a room filled with entrepreneurs. First of all, I would applaud them that we know that Nigerians have been known to be entrepreneurial, but I would challenge them as well that I think the next phase of our development requires that we raise the bar, not just built for us, but built for a global stage. And that requires us to step up in however we operated, step up our talent in how we design and how we structure in our process. Because it's when we take up the entire global market, that is truly, truly, truly when we give Nigeria justice. The name or the brand Nigeria becomes global. And that's what I want to see. I want to see a future where Nigerian innovation is exported. I want to see a future where I'm in the US using a technology and it's built by Nigerians and sold in the US.
Thank you so. Yeah, thank you, Val. Let's keep it going. Thank you. I mean, this has been so engaging and very impactful, Jane. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure
for coming, and we're hoping that I will always reach out to you.
I know.
Always.
You find me. You always find me.
I always find you. So just please, when we come again, say yes to us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And this brings us to the end of today's episode. And it's been a pleasure. My name is Coach Linda Oneze with my co-hosts,
Chioma Mbanogo.
See you next time.